Have you ever heard about preppers surviving natural disasters? Probably not. But why is that? Have you ever shrugged and wondered, well, if they aren't making it out of a disaster, why should I bother? The answer may surprise you, and here are my two experiences that will explain it. Hi, I'm the Urban Lady Prepper. I help single moms and solo women with practical emergency preparedness. But of course, all are welcome to be better prepared for whatever happens next. I recently joined Reddit. Okay, actually I joined it a while ago, but didn't have time to really dig in because all of the other things I've got going on. But anyway, I finally started going through some of the subreddits, and there was one for collapse. An account that is currently suspended wrote, I am amazed that the number of natural disasters, plus the widespread popularity of prepping, does not result in stories about preppers surviving natural disasters like floods and fires with their doomsday bunkers, bug-out bags, water filters, dehydrated food, solar panels, stacked car batteries, or hand-cranked generators. If prepping can help with the disasters that are going on now, I suspect that they are completely worthless for the future madness that awaits us. Am I wrong? Now, that perception is not incorrect. For all the talk and videos about emergency preparedness, I can't recall a particular instance where a prepper was featured in the media for emerging victorious after a disaster. We preppers definitely have our stories about making it through a crisis, but we don't get coverage. Why? Why not highlight someone who can show that preparedness is worth it? Well, the main reason is that emergency preparedness isn't built on the kind of excitement that makes good sound bites. People want to read about someone surfing on a closet door across debris, not about the prepper who paid attention to the weather reports, had alerts set up, a go bag ready, and evacuated well before the situation became dangerous. Or the prepper who made sure that their spot was secure enough to ride it out and emerged no worse for wear. If you recall, I interviewed Dr. Anna Bounds a few weeks ago, and she shared her experiences of being in New York City during the pandemic. While there's always a mental and emotional component when it comes to getting through a disaster, she was able to get through it successfully and help others. Her efforts during the pandemic and the lessons she learned from preppers were put into practice, and she wrote 2 books about it. But because of her readiness, there wasn't the extreme personal human trauma that fuels clicks and views. I have an upcoming blog article focusing on a few women who survived wildfires and flooding. But it's more about showing my single moms and solo ladies that ordinary women can do extraordinary things, rather than emphasizing how prepared they were. And at no point did any of the articles I read about these ladies mention what they did to prepare for these events. But again, that's not what makes their stories interesting enough to stop the scroll. The struggles during and after are what make their stories compelling, as well as what they learned, the support systems they created, and the emotional pull to read about how they got through it. Clearly, this is true as I wrote about them surviving, not whether they were ready for what happened. But I'm sure for 20 women who got their families to safety during an extreme event, there's at least one prepper who has a story to tell that didn't involve enough suffering to warrant an interview. Does all of this mean that every prepper is cool as a cucumber and never caught off guard during an emergency? Of course not. I definitely had my share of nail-biting moments. In 2011, I had already moved to Georgia when I had to return to New York to tie up some loose ends after my first husband's passing. But I had to do that drive when Hurricane Irene was coming up the East Coast. I was no more than a few hours ahead of the storm, and it was me and my dog booking it up I-95, hoping to be able to batten down the hatches in time. My nerves were shot, I was operating on very little sleep, and because I was moving, I was dealing with that and the stress of the usual things that happen when someone close to you passes away. I didn't keep great tabs on where everything was, so I was hoping that I brought what I needed and what I thought was left up in New York would still be there. By the time I arrived, the rain was really coming down, and I had just enough time to pick up plywood, strap it in my car, and get it to the house. A neighbor helped me board up my windows, and I also helped them with theirs. An announcement said that the power would go out in my area at approximately 2 a.m., and sure enough, at 1:59:59, the power went out. My coolers had ice, so I had a place for my milk, my eggs, and a 6-pack. Because I had a gas stove and a gas water heater, I could cook what food I had and take a hot shower. The damage to my home was, thankfully, minimal, as Irene had been downgraded to a tropical storm. But the experience was rough on some of the neighbors because we hadn't had a hurricane like that since, I believe, Gloria in 1985. But if Irene and me helping them with things they neglected to do or have didn't inspire them to be more prepared for the next time, they hadn't seen nothing yet because the following year was Hurricane Sandy. I come up to New York again and while there, decided to take a bus down to Atlantic City. I'd arrived there a couple of days before the storm hit, and while most people didn't seem overly concerned about the storm, I still kept tabs on it since it was likely to hit the East Coast, and the reports kept getting more dire. There was chatter that the governor would shut down Atlantic City, so I immediately headed to the depot so I could get out of there. When he did shut it down, the depot flooded with people, and I watched Atlantic City turn into a scene from The Walking Dead. Because I got there earlier than a crush, I was already in line and got the last ticket on the last bus out of town. I know this because the clerk told the person behind me that there were no buses left. Much like with Irene, I was able to ride out the storm at my house, which still hadn't sold. While I knew some who chose to stay and had to swim out of upstairs windows or be rescued, the aftermath of the storm is what made me realize more than ever that emergency preparedness wasn't a thing. I realized that many people didn't know that if there's no power, the gas stations can't pump gas. For those stations that did have power, some people waited in line for hours. Yes, there were fights at some of the stations. There were no deliveries for days. Folks lost a lot of food if they didn't have means to cook it or keep it cold. One day, I went to the local 7-Eleven hoping for some coffee, and a well-dressed man was standing in the middle of the store looking dumbfounded. The store was practically empty of stuff. There were some random items left on the shelves and a couple of drinks in the refrigerated cases, but basically there was nothing. The stunned look on his face let me know 4 things. He didn't heed the warnings about how bad it could get, that he wasn't prepared, that he didn't have much food at home, and within 2 days tops, if he didn't find a way to get what he needed, he wouldn't care who he had to roll to get their stuff if it meant feeding his kids. Did folks learn their lesson after that? Nope. As bad as it was, everyone believed that it would pass and things would return to normal. Eventually it did. While some areas remained devastated for much longer than it should have, power was eventually restored, trucks arrived to replenish supplies, and life returned to normal. People's memory of how bad it was and how much worse it could have been was forgotten as soon as they could turn their TVs back on and go to the store that was freshly restocked with all their favorite snacks. I would have conversations with people and casually ask if it happened again, if they thought they'd be better prepared for it. Most of them just shrugged and either said it wouldn't happen again or that they hadn't really given it much thought. That blew my mind. There are family, friends, and people in the community that I would be happy to help and would be concerned about. But it really made me think about all the acquaintances and strangers who would become so desperate that they would pose a greater threat to me than the disaster itself. This is why a somewhat recurring theme in my blogs and podcasts is that while you do want to take your community into account and have some sort of cooperation, you need to be discreet with your prepping because you don't always want to announce what and how much you have. The same people who are so blasé after devastation the moment things seem normal again would turn into entirely different people if the power were to go off for weeks and they had no food, water, or light source, but new people who might. It was at this point I realized my ability to get through those 2 events was partially due to my preparedness, but also fortunate that my area, while damaged, was not devastated. I began preparing with a little more focus and purpose because I was now a solo woman, and I had to be sure that I could take care of myself and handle whatever craziness might be looming on the horizon. So, how did I answer the poster asking if prepping was worthless? Here was my response. The thing with preppers is that we don't advertise, we prepare and then execute. We know in advance when it's time to vacate an area, and it's usually before everyone else, so we're not caught out there. There's no miracle survivors because we don't hang out long enough to get stuck and have to count on luck to survive. If we do ride things out, our stories aren't interesting because we have water, food, and gear to get through whatever it is, and that doesn't make for a dramatic story. We've also prepped mentally, so when it's go time, it's about executing a plan, not hysterics. We're ready to hunker down for days, weeks, or longer to get through a crisis, so you probably won't hear about preppers surviving because 1. Preparedness isn't sexy, and 2. we did what we had to, and now we just have to go through with it as planned. And 3, we tend not to let those who didn't prepare know that we did, because chances are those people did not learn from their lack of prepping and would then seek us out for our supplies when the next disaster hits. As the saying goes, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Prepping is important and necessary, and no matter the disaster, you need the same basic things. So if you start from there, you're ahead and better off than most. That was my answer. So yes, preparedness is worth it. If you haven't begun, I suggest that you do, because the party's just getting started around these parts. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there. Until next time, this is the Urban Lady Prepper signing off. I'm sure I've given you some things to think about as you go through the upcoming week. Has this episode resonated with you? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to click the link in the podcast description to get your free Essential Prepper checklist. While there, get one of my cool designs on a shirt, hat, mug, and more at my Redbubble store. Or you can always buy me a coffee or get a Jace case for your emergency medical needs. It helps support what I do, and I really appreciate it. Join me on the socials, especially on YouTube, where I'll be uploading videos for my blogs from urbanladyprepper.com. I appreciate your time with me. Stay safe, stay sharp, and be ready.